Hello and welcome to Legal Basics with Sarah Law Global, and my name is Tian. Now, last week we wrapped up the series on marriage law. I hope that you have learned a lot, but most importantly, I hope that now you're more intentional in your relationships. If you do not want to be married, do not be in a situation that's like a marriage. And then if you want to be married, make sure whatever you're in amounts to a marriage. I hope this also puts a stop to stories like I am married, but it's not that serious. Anyway, today we're going to start the employment law series, which, as we said last time, is also one of the most requested topic in these times of COVID. So we're going to be doing the labor law series and trying to see the legal aspects of labor. So just like a marriage, when people need courts or the law to intervene in a situation, that situation is unemployment, you have to answer one basic question. Is there a valid marriage? So the same thing for employment law. You have to ask and answer a question. Is there a valid contract for employment? So with us today, we're joined with a legal expert on employment matters, and I will let him introduce himself. So without further ado, welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Sian, and hello, viewers. I'm very grateful to be here today to share with you on this very important and necessary topic on the essentials of employment contract. By introduction, my name is Isaac Kiche. I am an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. I'm a mediator and also an arbitrator. Apart from that, I'm a senior associate at the firm of OOK Law Advocates, which is a top-notch law firm dealing with dispute resolution with a practical experience of more than 18 years in Kenya and even globally. So thank you very much.
Welcome to the broadcast. Clearly, we're in good hands. So now, Mr. Kiche, I would like you to explain to the viewers, does a contract of employment have to be written? Can it be oral? Under what circumstances must it be either?
Thank you, Sian, for that question. The employment contract or relationship can either be oral or it can be written. So what the law has done is to give the employees and employers an opportunity to get into engagement even if there is no written document. So yes, it can either be written or oral.
All right.
Yeah.
So now when people get into contracts, sometimes it's through a very small conversation. You go downstairs, you find a lady, you ask her, can you do my laundry? She says, well, how much laundry do you have? You say, I have a full bucket.
Yes.
Sometimes someone calls you and asks you, can you perform at my wedding tomorrow? Yes. And that conversation forms a contract.
Yes.
And then sometimes people sit through an interview and agree on terms and they have something solidified. Yes. So we would just like to expand for the viewers today, as they enter into these contracts, what are some of the clauses or some of the terms that must be that are so essential and that should be present all the time when parties are getting into a contract?
Thank you. Now, when an employer and employee begin this journey of engagement, as we have said, it can either be orally or it can be written. So what is important, especially for the oral contracts, is first, the employer needs to give instructions to the employee on what is supposed to be done. And on the part of the employee, he needs to do that work. And following the performance of that work, then he needs to be paid. So really, in an oral contract, what are the ingredient elements is the work, the instruction to do the work, the actual performance of that work, and the payment for what you have done. So really, in a nutshell or in brief, that really is what captures that engagement. Now, when it comes to a written contract, of course, what the law has done is to make it very simple to both employers and even employees. the law has provided the basic minimum. There are things that already are in the law that you just need to copy and paste. So even if you do not have an experience on how to do it, when you look at the law, it will give you like a template of what you need to put in the contract. But apart from that, it also gives you the flexibility to add something that would improve the performance of your employee. So what the law does is just to give you the starting point. You can negotiate and increase or improve the terms so that when the employee comes to your office, they have the motivation to do it. So what that does is it gives you the flexibility to negotiate. So there are things which must be present in that contract. Number one, you need to properly identify the employer. You need to give your description. The same goes to the description of the employee. Then beyond that, you need to define what is the employee going to do? What is this job description? So that you need to list. Apart from that, you need to define or just give briefly what is the term of this contract? How long is it going to take? So that when the employee engages, he or she knows, I'm going to be here for this while. So beyond that, you also need to capture the other essential portion of it, which is how much is the employee going to be paid, and what is the interval of that payment, what is the rate of that payment. So those are some of the key elements, but we also need to talk about when it reaches the point when you need to part ways. How are you going to do it? Do you need, how long do you need to give the notice? So there has to be that termination notice. But coming from what is emerging from practice is that we see in a number of cases when there's differences between the employer and the employee, because you can't put everything in this contract. So what has emerged is that there are elements which are critical to this contract that cannot be captured in this the simple contract, because you need to make it as simple as possible. So what you do in those cases, you put those terms in the what you call the HR manual or the policies, so that the employee, when you engage the employee, he'll read the contract, but apart from the contract, there is the HR manual, which will just guide their day-to-day interaction in the office. So I would say those really are the critical components of an employment contract.
All right.
Yeah.
So now, Mr. Kitchen, now that you bring up the issue of HR manuals,
Yes.
and maybe other policy documents at the workplace,
Yeah.
in the event that there's an inconsistency between the employment contract
Yes.
and the HR manual at the office,
Yes.
and what will supersede the other?
Thank you very much. And that's actually a very good question, because it has come many times when there is a bit of inconsistency between those two documents. But to resolve that dispute, what the law says is that the employment contract is the guiding document, because before you even get to the HR manual, you need to have the contract first, because it's the contract that incorporates or brings forward the HR manual. So it is the employment contract that would supersede. It has a high authority than the HR manual.
Okay. Now, aside from the terms that are prescribed in the Employment Act,
Yes.
to be part of a contract of employment,
Yes.
in your own experience in the practice of law,
Yeah.
what are some of the things that are not necessarily in the Act, but just from your experience and from what your clients go through, you feel is also a critical detail to include in a contract of employment?
Thank you. I think looking at the practice and the cases that have come up, there are areas which, of course, cannot be captured in the contract or are not in the Employment Act. One of them is the aspect of performance. When you want to terminate an employee on the basis of performance. It's not clearly provided in law, but it is something that the employers have to grapple with every single day, because there are moments when perhaps the performance of an employee can, can be impacted by various factors. So you need to at least make a provision for performance improvement plan, instead of just thinking of terminating your employee because of lack of performance. Give them an opportunity, give them a second chance, and this you can do through a performance improvement plan. That's number one. Number two, there's a lot of dispute when it comes to when parties want to part ways. And the law, of course, provides for you can be terminated, you can go through dismissal or redundancy. But because the employment contract is an engagement between these two people, what is emerging is that there needs to be some flexibility between the employer and the employee to sit down and end it. So there's a bit of borrowing that the country is doing in terms of the laws in South Africa. In that country, they allow for a separation agreement. You sit down and agree on the terms, just like the same way you do when you are retiring or you want to have early retirement. There's that package.
Yeah.
So the law is trying to move towards the area of allowing employer and employee to sit down, agree on the terms, and separate without really having to fight it in court. Yeah, so it's an element that from practice I find to be very useful. Because sometimes there's the reputational damage that would occur when parties separate not in a very tidy manner. So to ensure that there is no that back and forth fight, you sit down and bring it, talk it out.
And have a separation agreement.
Yes.
Wow, I have learned so much from this particular episode.
Thank you.
Mr. Kiche, if our viewers have further queries on this topic, how should they reach you?
Thank you. They can reach me through my office email, which is ikiche@oklaw.com. I'm also available on Twitter at Isaac Kiche. They can follow me on that. I'm also available on LinkedIn, same way, Isaac Kiche. So we can be able to engage even on those platforms.
Thank you, Mr. Kiche, for creating the time to come and explain these concepts to us.
Yes.
And thank you to you viewers for sticking with us, for working with us, for your questions, your queries, and your growth is our growth. We would also like to thank Chugiti and Chugiti Advocates for supporting us through the shooting of this series. We would also like to thank Mushiri Frames, which is the videography crew. They will share their email address, and we hope that you're going to take care of yourselves, and we hope that you've learned a lot from this series. It's bye-bye from us. Bye-bye.